Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. Today we're going to be talking about getting your money's worth. So, I've collected all kinds of stuff over the years, and the way I've done it is different than most. If you're a money guy and you get interested in something, you just take all your money and go buy up a big pile of stuff, and there you have it. And you can gloat to all your buddies like, oh look, I just bought 50,000 chainsaws and only spent $1 million. Well, that's not me. I'm what's called an accumulator. So, in 1980 I started out burning wood to heat the house. And first axe I bought was just a standard generic off-the-shelf axe, meaning it wasn't very good, but better than nothing. And so we had a lot of trees on the property, so I didn't need to go looking for wood. I bought a chainsaw that year also, which I've talked about in a lot of my videos, my McCullough ProMac 610. And one day I was out chopping up some wood, and my buddy Goose comes over and sees me chopping away with that crummy axe, and he says, oh, that's no good. You don't want a crummy axe like that. So he went out to his truck and brought me an axe. Here it is. It's a Collins double bit. That was kind of the sort of beginning of my sort of becoming an axe collector. So I had a unique thing how I ended up with axes as I have, because at the shop that I worked at, we had a display area out in the front, and then as you come in, if you looked off to the side, you could see right into the shop, and that was where I worked. And then out on the wall there by the counter and whatnot, I'd have an old chainsaw, an outboard motor, whatever. And people would say, oh, well, do you work on this and that? And I said, yeah, we work on just about everything here. But anyway, there was these three characters that I knew. All three of them were named Mike, of all the weird things. And what they would do is they would go to estates, yard sales and stuff, and they'd buy whatever's left over. Then they'd go around to people, business owners and different people, and say, you're looking for anything in particular? And I thought, well, I just have a couple of axes, and in the Northwest here, Pacific Northwest, there's a rich axe history, and I thought, well, maybe I should start collecting axes. So I had a couple of empty 5-gallon buckets on a bench there, and I said, yeah, if you find an axe head, just come by every so often and I'll get it from you. And so they did, and they were usually rusty and almost never had a handle on them. But they were just looking for beer money or whatever like that, and so I usually only paid about $5 a piece for them. And over time they started adding up, because that was probably over about a 10-year period that I ended up with them. Like I say, it was just hit and miss when they came in. But anyway, I decided to start looking into axe history, and so since I like historic stuff to go along with my junk collecting, I got this really excellent book on axes. It shows the different types and whatnot and the uses for them. And so as time went on, I had all these used axe heads laying around with no handles on them, and we used to go to the antique engine and tractor shows. I had displays at them for many, many years. And a couple of the shows, a guy would show up. He had a great big van, and it was completely full of axe handles. Hatchet handles and hammer handles, but mostly axe handles. And so here's one of them right here. You see that big price there? $7. And they were usually anywhere from $4 to $12. And the thing with them, they're not real high grade handles, but I would look at them for the grain structure, and this grain structure in this one's straight. It's 100% perfect. The only thing I don't like about them, they're clubby, but hey, I got a draw knife to thin them out. So anyway, I just started putting together axes over time, and so it's amazing the quality of the axes, how they varied so much. Now this is a Grand Force Brux, and they're considered today to be the best axe you can buy, and they're also terribly expensive. Something like this is over $200 today. This one is unique. It's got the logo here. It says made in Sweden. Over here it says made for export. So this was made in the 1920s for export to the US. And the steel in this is the best of any axe I've ever had. You can shave with this thing. There again, I put one of semi-chromy handles on there, but hey, it works. And like I say, that's probably the sharpest and longest lasting edge on any that I have. We get a couple of more here to talk about. And the Collins here was my most used axe forever. And my second is my Plum, and the Plum is about the same size as this one, but it's substantially heavier. So if I get in some tough wood, and this also has a nice thinner handle. I believe this one actually came with a handle. And then we get into some single bits. And you know, these are for splitting firewood because of the wide wedge on them here. But I find for the type of wood that I cut, these double bits are much better and faster. And the thing that saves you time too, you can see the difference in the thickness of these, how thin that one is and how thick this one is. So if you're cutting a typical piece of firewood with one of these, it doesn't split it right at the top. It cuts down deep and then it finally pops apart. But the benefit of that is that the wood splits at the bottom and doesn't go flying out. With these, the wedge up at the top, it splits at the top and the wood goes flying. So I have to do a lot less picking up and moving around to grab the stuff. And this one is one that the head I actually purchased off Fleabay. It's an Evansville, and the Evansville axes are some of the best stuff I've ever run across. And I have my little small forest axe, which is my most used axe today. And this one doesn't cut that, it doesn't split that good, but it's got a real blunt edge. I need to rework it. And then this is another one. It's got every nice feature you can think of. It's a stiletto, which is supposed to be highly thought after and whatnot. And this thing doesn't split for squat. It's terrible. So anyway, it does have a nice thin handle I put on it though. And then of course we can't forget our hatchets. And so here we have, this is a Holtzbrook, and another company that Grand Force bought them out, but they were another top line axe supplier from Sweden. And then I bought a new handle here. So the thing that, if you look on Fleabay and different places today, you know, if you buy a complete axe like this, you're going to pay, you know, say $75 to $150. And with the way that I went, so $5 for a head and $7 for a handle, $12. So that's why I'm thrifty, or cheap. Well, Callie's gonna introduce us to our spark plug cleaner here. That's another way that I save money big time. A lot of spark plugs don't really wear out. You get deposits on them. If you got a 4-stroke engine, you know, burning oil, you can have carbon on them. If you're running modern 2-stroke oils, synthetic stuff, you're going to have ash on them. So anyway, the best way to do it is like this. I just reuse spark plugs for years and years. I haven't hardly bought any new spark plugs for quite some time, except for recently I need to get some new spark plugs for my truck pickup, and I just bought some regular NGKs for it, and I figured, well, they're probably about $4.5 a piece. This was a retail auto parts store, They're almost $7 a piece. Gave me brown short syndrome. So on the old ones, like I say, I can reuse them and reuse them. So we'll come over and I'll show you what they look like and why they need to be cleaned. Okay, well here's a plug that you can see it's got carbon fouling, burning oil. This one, the electrode area here is still clean, so it burned good, but it has carbon all around the face here, and it builds up down in between the insulator and the body here and eventually shorts them out. Here's a chainsaw plug, and there again you can see the color in the center is about the correct color for burning, but they still have carbon build up here on the body here. There's another carbon fouled, and the insulator is covered with carbon, and so is the electrode. This one just needs a little cleanup. There again is typical. You can see it's clean on one side, more carbon on this side, and carbon down in the center there. And that has to, this is off a flathead gas engine, so the airflow coming across where the spark plug is keeps the one side cleaner than the other. And it's not a hot plug. Flatheads don't use very hot spark plugs, and so it doesn't burn off the carbon. Anyway, we've got our nice vintage Vixen cleaner here. It's got two buttons up here. One of them you press, and the sand that you blast them, and then the other one's to press fresh air and cleans it off. So let's try it and see how it works here. We'll start with this one. I'm going to rotate it and blast it here. You see that? Nice and clean. So the next thing you want to do, since you got sand and whatnot in them, you use a little compressed air. In this case, we'll just use some brake clean and just wash it off, and it'll be ready to go. Now let's do our little chainsaw plug next here. There's still a little bit of carbon right there, but just have to run it a little longer. There we go. Let's see, like I say, saves me lots of money. If you're paying $5 to $7 a spark plug and you can clean it and reuse it for about 1 cent of electricity, that's a win for me. Yeah, it's got a lot of carbon down in the bottom there, so it's going to take a little bit. I need to up the air pressure to get that one clean. It's got a lot of carbon on it, but anyway, there you go. How to be Mr. Thrifty or cheap and get your money's worth. I think I paid about $25 for this and $5 for the sand. So I'll move on to our next goodie. Well, here's another perfect example of getting your money's worth. My 1960 Montgomery Ward's Garden Mark Squire tractor. This has been on the homestead for a quarter of a century, and just super reliable. It's kind of interesting how I got it. There's a guy down by Salem, Oregon, who had a big collection of garden tractors, and he decided to specialize in just certain types, which weren't these. These were made by the Simplicity Manufacturing Company. But anyway, I went down and started looking through them, and I'd worked on these for customers over the years, and I knew how super well built they were. And so I decided on this one. Paid the big $75 price tag for it. Wasn't running at the time, had a few little problems. One of them, the steering was frozen up, which is a common problem on these if they sit for too long. But since I'd worked on it before, I knew how to work around it and get everything working again. And so these have a regular steel frame, and they don't have a transaxle. They have an actual regular transmission. It's got a 3-speed with reverse, all straight cut gears. Well, the reason that I don't like modern garden tractors and why I always use vintage is that the new ones have a hydrostatic drive in many of them, which are prone to failures. And they also don't tow stuff very well, and the reason for that is that to run the hydraulic motor and the gear pump takes a lot of horsepower, so that's why you see these new ones 16, 18, 20, 25 horsepower, but they won't tow anything very heavy. Whereas this one has a mighty 7 horsepower Briggs & Stratton cast iron engine, and the transmission has straight cut steel gears, and the differential has a full differential in it. And like I say, the new tractors use what's called a transaxle, and its transmission and drive axle assembly are all one piece. They're made out of really cheap materials, and if they're used hard, they have a high failure rate. Well, this thing will outlast everything. So anyway, things that I like about it is it costs virtually nothing to operate. Like I say, I paid $75 for it. It still has the same old rotten tires. If you look close at them, you'll see they're just full of stress cracks, although they have really good tread on them. And the thing is, over the years they've gotten so hard I don't even have to air them up anymore. They're like rock hard, but they still have really, really good traction. So the only things that this thing really needed was freeing up the steering. I put a new drive belt for the starter on it, which is right here. That's actually a generator like they used on old cars, a 12-volt DC generator. And the thing is that if you run power into the field windings, it actually becomes a motor, turns the engine over, and then there's of course a drive belt. So anyway, I'll show you some of the features of it here. Here's some of the things on it here. Here's the drive belt. That's probably the highest wear item on the whole tractor. I think in all the years I've had it, it's on its 3rd belt. But you can see that the frame here is plate steel. It's not just stamped tin like most. It has cast iron place here for the drive shaft to run through, and the main transmission back here, and then the differentials down below. It's all cast iron, has really nice bearings in it. The only thing that needs to be serviced on it, occasionally I change the oil on them. Okay, well, for our last portion of the video, I'm going to be talking about our Coleman stuff here. Now, at the shop, like I say, you could walk in and look right where I was working and stuff, and mostly worked on cars, trucks, occasional tractor, occasional vintage motorcycle, outboard motors, generators, tillers. So people would never know what I would be working on, but they could see that I would work on just about anything, and I wasn't charging a big high rate for doing it. I was just working on stuff in between other jobs, and so people always appreciated getting a good deal and getting their stuff working again. And it's interesting that the largest portion of my collection, chainsaws and all engines, lawnmowers and stuff like that, were either free or really cheap, which is right up my alley. So we get to this. My son's friend had this at a garage sale, and nobody'd buy them, and Dad knows I'm a big time junk collector, so he said, hey, why don't you give that Coleman stove and lantern to your dad? Well, anyway, he gave those to us, and even though he's an avid outdoorsman, hunter and whatnot, he had no interest in it. And so they showed up, and the stove was pretty nice looking. The lantern here was really scroungy looking. So when we got the stove, it was dirty, but it has almost all the paint on it. There's a little burn off here, but that can be cleaned up and touched up. But like I say, a lot of people just don't want to take the time to fix stuff these days, or don't know how. That's also a problem. But the only thing I needed to do on this was clean it, like I say. Still had some fuel in it. The fuel cap gasket, which often is bad on these, didn't need replacing. And so the only thing I did was, the pump here, they have a leather seal in it, and so I just lubricated that, and it pumped right up. It lights right up. And so the other thing here is the lantern. There again, it was really dirty, and the lens was missing here, but he gave me 3 lanterns, and one of them was a real beater, had a good globe in it, so I put it in here. So, talking about being thrifty and cheap, I probably used about 4 cents of oil to oil a pump there, and it still had some gas in it, and it lit right up on it. The lantern required a little more. I needed to take it apart. The generator, which mixes the fuel and vaporizes it, needed to be cleaned, and I needed a new cap gasket here. And of course the mantles are always bad on these things, and then the generator needed to be cleaned, and this has a cleaning tip on it. So anyway, the only thing I did basically, other than elbow work, $2 for a gasket and some oil for the pump, and 2 new mantles. So the mantles are about $4.50 a piece, so we got $9 and $2 for this. So we got $11 in this perfectly operating lantern, and as you can see, it turned out really, really nice. These are both 1966. This has a striker on it too, which is nice. You got a flint in there, so won't see it on the camera obviously, but anyway, so that's how you can be thrifty and cheap and become a successful collector. Well, these are perfect examples of getting your money's worth. And so the price was free. Stove, all I had to do was oil the pump to get it to work. Put a little more gas in it. A lantern, new gas cap, gasket for $2. Lubricated the pump to get it working. 2 mantles, $4.50 a piece. And cleaned the generator just to make sure it worked perfectly. So there you go. $11, brand new. One of these is $135. So being thrifty and cheap works out good for me. We'll see you on the next vintage video.